What's up, everyone? So I was reading a book called Business Adventures. It was something that's highly recommended by Bill Gates and one of Warren Buffett's favorite books. And I was going through it, and it's actually taught me quite a few interesting things. But one of the most interesting things that I've discovered in it is something in the chapter Xerox, which is actually available for free if you go to Bill Gates' website or any place that has this article, any form of social media such as LinkedIn, where he talks about business adventures. Even his YouTube, where he talks about the book, you'll get a free copy of that chapter you can read if you want. And it mentions something very interesting about business. And basically, long story short, what it says is that the typewriter was released for I think it was over 10 years, and it had not taken up popularity. And then it posed the same thing with the copy machine. And I think it illustrates a great point in that revolutionary technology or revolutionary businesses that are going to succeed, they aren't immediately taken up by storm. They're not immediately noticed by the public. And I think this will happen in the future. And it's probably happening right now as we speak. There's probably some business or company out there who, and again, I'm not talking businesses that don't have that are competing against many other businesses and are tech and startup, because that's an area where you don't know what's going to happen, because this could succeed or one of thousands of other businesses in similar fields in the same industry could succeed at this market. I'm more so talking about like products that are going to revolutionize society, but for some reason have been released and have been introduced to the public for a while now, that for the first few years or few months or maybe even few decades after its release, probably not decades now, have yet to be really appreciated, but will in the future. And so what's the whole point of this? Okay, so the typewriter was released. It rapidly increased the speed of typing and creating documents. Same thing with Xerox. Copying was not something that people thought was of much use, as illustrated by all the quotes in the chapter. Well, it's very useful for people who understand this and have noticed this in history, to really be more attentive at products or services that are introduced in the market, and to really consider things more than the average person and think maybe this has a chance. And the huge fallacy behind this is the flip side, where people go to extreme and they focus too heavily on the most obvious things, like the biggest tech companies right now, or the most well-known fast food establishment up and coming. So, for instance, Chipotle or Amazon.com. And they think they're so smart in, finding this new thing out, when in reality, those are the things that are already super hyped up and everyone knows about it. And so, again, it's just very interesting and also very hard for someone to actually capitalize on. But it is something that can be useful for anyone who looks out for it. And I mean, think about it. Another example is probably Walmart as a business. It was released publicly, and as Peter Lynch, the great investor, says, even if you didn't buy Walmart, 10 years after it was publicly released as a stock, if you bought it 10 years after its IPO, you would have still made like 10 times your money in the following years. And people just failed to buy it. They failed to really consider the company. Same thing with Coca-Cola, and really realize its value and realize this thing is generating massive returns and will continue to do so. And I'm sure it will happen in the future. So things will now and then continue to be undervalued. Finally, I want to finish up with one last example, and this one is just going to be on the fact that it's illustrating one aspect of why this happens. So we're talking Walmart and what was the other one I was talking about? Coca-Cola. I think one of the big aspects is that as to why people fail to invest after 10 years or in that first 10-year span from its first initial public offering is the fact that both of these companies had already expanded to a large area. They were already nationwide. So people thought they couldn't grow any further. They couldn't replicate their process any further. For Walmart especially, it had a huge sort of upheaval. If you read the book Made in America by Sam Walton, he talks about this, where a ton of his management just up and left him, including the CEO, because Sam didn't think the CEO was doing the right thing, and it was causing like a fight between the old and the new management. So like I think it was like a third of the management left, and that's very important. Bill Gates talks about this. One of the biggest things that makes up the success of his business is the key people, and he said something in one of his talks that if those 20 people were to up and leave the organization, that would almost ruin the organization. Again, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that happened. A third of the people left, and I'm sure a lot of people lost hope in Walmart. In fact, if you read his book, it's almost like Wall Street was always like skeptical of Walmart, and Sam continued to prove it wrong. And so what happened was, as Sam Walton always does throughout his book, he pretty much makes lemons into lemonade. So he made this management upheaval into a great thing by finally being able to bring about even greater, arguably greater people to run the company than he had before, and people he had been trying to get for decades that he couldn't convince to join his board, or not his board, but his management team. And so ultimately, that's one really important thing you have to look for. It's not always a horrible thing. Growth can still happen. Coca-Cola, it was a huge example. I believe there was an article published by, I think its CEO decades ago, saying that it was very interesting how he worded it. He said something like, people continue to underestimate Coca-Cola and think that we have finished growing. And that article was written like in the 1920s. And it was probably the truest thing ever about Coca-Cola. And it was, just to paraphrase what he said, he was like, year after year, investors keep saying that Coca-Cola has stopped growing, because Coca-Cola was already nationwide by that point. And he said like something like, people keep underestimating the fact of Coca-Cola's potential for growth. Year after year, people keep saying that it has reached its saturation and therefore is not worth investing in. Stop believing in that foolishness. And as history illustrates, he was right. Every single year, it's 2014 and they're still expanding and still growing and still generating enormous profits. So if you had bought Coca-Cola any time if you bought in 1920, if you bought $1 of it, you'd be like a million. You have millions of dollars now. And it just illustrates that, if you're looking at the long term, not 5-year, 10-year, but 50 or 100-year, future of a business like Coca-Cola, it went through a lot of things. 2 world wars, all these upheavals, political problems, all these economic macro scale problems, and so forth, and it still generated so much revenue and so much profit. And so, long story short, don't underestimate growth, don't overestimate it either. And also keep into consideration the fact that not all bad events are 100% guaranteed bad, as illustrated by Sam Walton's management move. As always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching.